Welcome, my friends, my family, my fellow gamers. Your boy Porter Rock 77, your only friend these YouTube streets, and welcome back to the channel. Today, what I'm going to do is do a hot take on specifically a breakdown of Sony's third quarter 2021 investors call, but specifically speaking on the games and network services and PlayStation part. The reason why I'm doing this video, because there's a lot of many of you, primarily through Twitter. Aren't sure what information is legit, or sites are cloud chasing, or console warring. A lot of people aren't really sure what was said during the investors call, and some people aren't really trusting some of the sources that are being pushed out there. Some people feel it's being said just to antagonize a console war, or just a way to get clicks or clickbait. So some people aren't really trusting the information out there, especially when some journalists already have prone to not be so reliable, some being one-sided. So ultimately what I did was you can easily access the investors call and listen to it for yourself. I will have the link posted in the description box, but I'm going to give you like the quick notes and pretty much go through this. And so hopefully this will help you out if you're interested in the conversation. And this is just pretty much what was talked about. It was chaired by Executive Deputy President and Chief Financial Officer Hiroki Totoki. So he was the one that was primarily presenting the presentation. And then towards the end, there was a Q&A session. The first round was with journalists, and then the second round was with analysts. I will also break down specifically the ones that talked about the gaming side. Now remember, this is a Sony investor call, so they have a lot of topics across all their divisions. So they're talking about their bank that they have under one of their divisions. They're talking about the television segment, the image sensor segment. They have a whole music segment, their Sony picture segment. But I'm only going to particularly talk about the games and network segment, which is pretty much PlayStation, right? So we're going to start real quick with this right here, Acquisitional Bungie, right? We already heard that Sony is acquiring Bungie. They're becoming part of first party, but I'm gonna give you a little bit more detail to this, okay? So that way we get the right information, and you see that it's not so much, a lot of the information that's going out there is accurate, but but you're gonna hear it here, okay? So during the earnings call, you heard that they paid $3.6 billion for the acquisition. There's some nuance to that, but a lot of people are assuming what is the reason. Some people feel it wasn't a good purchase because you only get one IP and one developer. And they compared it to what Microsoft is doing. Some people are feeling, what was Sony thinking and all that stuff. So here's the main thought process, and this is from their slide. So what you're looking at here is Sony tracking the rate at global game content has done year over year since 2014. So from 2014 to 2021, game add-on content has been growing at a rate of 15% every single year. And according to this, and forgive me because me looking down, I'm looking at my notes here. A big part of that has been like the money transaction. So you see the growth 2014 in dollars, and you see how it is now. So Sony sees this growth will continue, potentially at the similar rate or maybe even faster. So they want to capitalize that. This is one of the reasons why they got Bungie. So during this time period, if you remember when Destiny came out around that time in 2014. And because of these numbers growing of how the consumption of games have grew in this manner, especially with add-on content, Bungie capitalized this movement and they become very successful. So Sony's trying to feed off that momentum and that understanding of what made them so successful. Okay, with this acquisition, they attained the following from Sony's strategic point of view. One, they obtained Destiny, and there is confirmed a new IP that the Bungie's working on, which is also another live service multiplayer. And so now that falls under PlayStation first party. Now I'm gonna be honest with the conversation. Now keep in mind this: the investors call, if you do listen to it, you'll see it's spoken in Japanese, but there's an interpreter for those trying to listen in English. And the translation could be rough. but what it sounds like, Bungie will remain as a multi-platform developer. And there's even talks, some of the comments mention about PlayStation expanding beyond the PlayStation ecosystem platform and stuff like that. So they are looking for growth further beyond PlayStation. Now, whether they're just talking about live services or in total, it was kind of hard to understand. I would say, in my opinion, it might be total, because they did mention God of War. And one of the comments was how successful the sales of God of War was on PC. Even mentioned it's 93 Metacritic. So Sony sees that as a very successful venture, putting God of War on PC. So there's potential Sony might have plans to try to put games on other platforms. I don't know if they mean competing platforms such as Xbox. Don't know if they're talking about maybe a strategy with another service like Epic Game Store. I'm not sure. But there is talk of expanding and providing the games elsewhere. So they are talking about that. So that's not a troll and that's not a clout comment if you're seeing that. Sony is looking to go beyond the PlayStation, to improve on it. Also, as you can see there, they're incorporating expertise and technology for live game services. That's like the main thing that's one of the main things Sony is attracted to. With the expertise and technology for game service through collaboration, Sony plans to release 10 live services style games by 2026. They're hoping that this partnership will accelerate the first party growth by 2025. Well, overall, like I said, this was pretty hard, but they mentioned something about accelerate first party growth by double by 2025. So I'm not sure if they're trying to double the output of first party games by 2025, or if they're trying to get the live services up. But one thing or another, in general, they plan to increase output in some form or fashion for their first party games. They want more first party games out there. Okay. So, and then finally, expanding first party titles into live game services area. As you can see, what I'm talking about before, the consistent growth from 2014 to 2021 is just simply too hard to ignore. So that's the main significance of this acquisition. So it was more than just saying they just bought it for Destiny. Not really. They got the new IP, but more importantly, Bungie has been very successful since 2014, capitalizing on this growth. And Sony's trying to tap into that wealth of knowledge and expertise to help support their live services game, to which they already have 10 planned. Go to the next one. All right. So this one, I'm going to simplify this. And this is where the $3.6 billion acquisition. So the actual cost of the company was actually $2.4 billion. The remaining $1.2 billion is considered... So let me go back. They describe Bungie as an employee sharehold company, and that this 1.2 billion is on a condition base, as long as the workers there are continue to be employed, meaning they don't leave. Okay, this 1.2 billion will be paid out over a course of several years after the acquisition. So the company, Bungie, the developers, was actually bought for 2.4 billion, which is around what they were always trying to sell. The extra 1.2 billion is paid out over the course of several years after the acquisition, and thus directly goes to the workers. So that way the top talent that's there, the talent that's been around, they don't leave, but they're properly compensated with this money. So the fundamental idea is Sony addressed that a lot of acquisitions, well, I can say a lot, but they say acquisitions sometimes tend to have the negative impact on the workers, and they tend to leave for one reason or another. And they're hoping this strategy will keep 900 employees, that's what was stated, to remain with the company, and with financial compensation that will be provided over the course of a couple of years post-acquisition. So it's a good strategy for them to keep. Wow. So as far as that portion for them speaking was about that. Of course, they mentioned numbers and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into that. I'm providing the information that's impactful for gamers, so you know about Bungie. As far as multi-platform strategy, they did mention, as it's translated, of Sony expanding their first parties beyond, not to contain it in their PlayStation environment to attract more consumers, and that's how they plan to grow their first party. So there's potential that Sony is actually talking about where, you know, the PlayStation console is just another device among devices similar to Xbox strategy. So don't be surprised if that's going to happen. You know, we'll see. We'll hear more about it, but they plan to grow their sales of first-party games in a similar manner, I say, to Xbox. So it's going to be interesting. So then after that, they started talking, you know, cars and image sensors and stuff like that. So I'm just going to skip all that. Excuse me. Oh, not the wrong one. I'm going to skip all that because then this is all talking about growth in India, which was kind of interesting, but it's too general. I'm just going to stick with the Q&A, all right? And I'm going to talk about the specific Q&A for the questions that pertain to PlayStation. So the first round of Q&A questions was from the journalists, various journalists in Japan and stuff, okay? The first question, and again, the translation, but first question was pertaining to the semiconductor shortage and how Sony is handling that in terms of prioritizing their equipment or products and stuff. So this is interesting. So the semiconductor shortage is not just impacting PlayStation, it's impacting all parts of the division that deals with electronics. So their image sensors, you know, their TVs, you know, stuff like that. And so they were asking how is Sony prioritizing, you know, who gets what in order to build their products and stuff. And I never even looked at it that way because remember, Sony does TVs and speakers and headsets and all this stuff. Well, all of that pertains to semiconductor. So who gets the priority for that stuff? So right now, Sony said specifically it's going to be they're prioritizing the high value products. And among them they mentioned is the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation VR. So that is interesting. Sony is considering the PSVR a high value product. So that means, and what that means is if you look at within their company, they got all these electronic devices. And then like speaker boxes, earbuds, think of all the things, look online, think of all the things Sony makes, right? PSVR, PlayStation, is among what they consider a high value product that will get first preference to access to these semiconductors as they get made available. Never really thought about it that way, that the shortage was something that the company now has to balance everything that they do and ask themselves, okay, where are we going to put the focus on? We're going to put focus on speakers or headphones, or are we going to decrease the amount of headphones we release this year or cameras in order to get these other devices up? So that's the challenge they were at. Another question was Sony right now is dipping into mobile gamings, but they have two divisions. The first one is actually the main arm of mobile gaming, which is Sony Music. If many of you didn't know, Sony Music are the ones that publishes the phone games that Sony has, you know, on iPhone and, you know, on I know Android or whatever, right? Well, PlayStation is also dipping into the mobile games, and they're apparently going to create unique games, but based on the popular IP. So you could potentially see a specific God of War game for phones, a specific Uncharted game for phones. I'm just breaking it up. But any IP, any classic IP or IP that, you know, we gamers know about Sony, expect to see specific mobile games. But they were asking, having two separate divisions seems weird. Is there any plans of merging them or PlayStation taking over? Hiroki Totoki wasn't too clear on that. He says he can't really discuss the plans of what they have now, but he did say that specifically that the IPs that PlayStation is known for, they will have mobile versions of that game, and they feel that it's going to be very successful on the platform. So stay tuned for that. And no, they didn't mention cloud or cloud-based, specifically unique content, but based off of PlayStation IPs. Next, another question that was asked is the impact of MS purchased. Do they have any response? How do they feel about that? How's it going to impact Sony operations? Totoki said he had no comment because there's not enough information to gauge on the impact it's going to have. Right now they're running on very little information for them to make a comment. They're unsure how things will turn out with Microsoft. And that's pretty much it. So I guess officially they don't really know what Microsoft really plans to do to actually make a statement on how this will affect. And if people are trying to wonder, I think the main thing is does Microsoft plan to make the games exclusive, which in turn means those games won't be available on PlayStation, which means, you know, the gamers who buy these games, you know, Sony won't get their 30% cut or whatever. So I think that's what's really they're talking about, but right now they don't have information and stuff like that. So that's on that one end. So those questions are pretty much what the journalists asked. In particular for PlayStation, there was much more questions because I think the whole session was like 20 minutes. But again, some may specifically have spoken about, you know, the new cars or whatever, you know, stuff like that. I'm just talking strictly on PlayStation. The next Q&A session, which was like another 20 minutes, was the analyst. And this one was interesting. The analyst asked really some good questions. One analyst asked with the actual forecast of actual PlayStation 5 sold being short by like 2 million. Does Sony still plan to forecast high numbers of for the next fiscal year? Pertaining to especially talks about 22.6 million. If you heard that number before, or Sony talking about, hey, we're going to sell more than 22.6 million, million units or something. The reason why that number is used specifically is because that is the current record of how many PlayStation consoles were sold within a single fiscal year, meaning within 1 year, how many, and that record is currently held by the PlayStation 1. There was one fiscal year where it sold 22.6 million, and they haven't been able to match that number since. But Sony, when that question was asked, well, to continue on, the question was pertaining to, do they feel that the demand is there to reach that number? And what about the capacity, the components? Sony keeps preaching that number because they feel, from a demand perspective, they can easily sell more than 22.6 million units in one fiscal year. They really feel that, yes, the demand is there. The issue that they're having is the capacity or capability to build that many consoles to sell within a year. So again, it's about the semiconductor shortage. Right? Now, they're forecasting high numbers because this is something that's not normally how forecasting numbers are. So normally when they forecast how many console sales, it's more like the demand. Is there a demand to sell 18 million consoles, 19 million consoles? If we make 17 million, will 17 million be sold? That's how normally they would, you know, actually gauge and make the expectation for the next year. But this is different. This isn't about demand. This is about their partners creating the components, and there's no way for them to gauge that. There's no way for them to predict, well, our partner's going to be able to provide so many components, which means we'll be able to make 16 million, which we're going to sell 16 million. That's not a system that, you know, they're able to do. So you're still going to see a high, how would you say, prediction from Sony. They're going to say, hey, we're going to be able to sell 19 million, 20 million, whatever. They're just going to keep high. And the reason being they're going to stay with that high number is so that way they could set the expectation. In their mind, if they try to set a lower expectation of, let's say, hey, we think we'll only sell 13 million this year because of shortages, they feel that won't motivate their partners who produce these stuff to actually get out there to help them fill that void. So in their mind, if they predict a high number, then everybody's gonna be motivated. They're gonna find ways. They're gonna try to do their best to help Sony reach those numbers. But in their mind, Sony feels they can easily sell over 22 million consoles in a single year. It's just the capacity. And then the next question was pertaining to criteria investments for acquisitions or, you know, for partners. Sony didn't go too much into it, but they said there's two things. Well, there's three things. The first is assessing the capability and the risk of acquiring companies. So they didn't go too into detail, but I would imagine this goes back to them looking for talent. So the capabilities of the company. So it's not so much getting IPs, which is what Microsoft is pretty much doing. Microsoft's going after the big companies with the big IPs, the big blockbuster IPs, and trying to put it on Game Pass. Sony's looking for capability, meaning, granted, you have this IP, but do you have the talent that we need for the future? So Sony's not looking so much as what the company has done in the past or what they own in terms of, hey, they own this IP. No, they're not looking at it from a games perspective. They're looking at it from a talent perspective, capabilities perspective. You know, what tools do they have? Do they have proprietary engines when they make these games? They're looking at things like that. They're looking at bolstering their capability to make PlayStation better, or PlayStation first party better, and not so much, hey, let's go buy this company or, you know, acquire this developer or publisher because of games that they have in their profile. So they are focused more on capability. And then they're looking at the risk. So what are the risks? Well, what are they? I'll use, for example, Konami. For example, Konami right now is a high risk to buy, even though they don't cost that much or they seem affordable. But Konami hasn't been investing in their games, AAA gaming, as you know, lately. And they've been making a lot of money outside of gaming. Pachinkos, casinos, laundromats, real estate. So it's a very risk for Sony to buy Konami for the sake of having developers or a game segment that they haven't really bolstered up yet, and their real money is outside of gaming. So that's not something. So like, for example, so for that, I don't see Sony ever going for Konami. That's just one example. And then they broke out, they mentioned two things in terms of acquisition. And this is interesting. With the decision, is it 100% acquisition or a buy-in for partnership? Which is interesting because it sounds like, the way he made it sound like, and again, well, I'm probably reading too much into it, but almost felt like it was already done or it's being done with somebody. And what I mean by that is their view is, hey, so when they're looking at acquisition, they could just say outright, hey, we're going to buy them, welcome to first party, or they buy into a partnership, maybe buy some shares and be part of the shareholders. So it seems like Sony's working that well. So for example, let's say, I'll give you a perfect example. Ubisoft. I'll use Ubisoft. So Ubisoft is independent, and the Guillot family, so I apologize if I mispronounced the last name, they're very hesitant on somebody owning them. They've been fighting it off. They fought with Vivendi. The Guillot family, so it's almost like a family-run business, even though it does have shareholders and all that, but that family will protect Ubisoft. So what if Sony approaches them, not with the intent to acquire them, but intent to be like, hey, let's do a partnership. We'll buy some shares. We work together. The Guillot family may be open to that, to where they're not owned by Sony. They still own the company, but there's a big partnership. I'm not saying that Sony's going after Ubisoft. I don't want anybody to be confused about that. I'm just trying to give you an example of the difference between acquisition and maybe a partnership. Another one might be Square Enix. Square Enix may not want to be bought, but they may want the comfort of knowing that Sony is an official partner with them, you know, in this trying this crazy times of video games. So that was also an interesting point. And then finally from the analyst is, and this is interesting, with the Bungie purchase, he asked, what's in it for Bungie and what's in it for you? So we kind of got the answer from Sony, but we'll just go at it again. Sony, they see Bungie as the ability to create successful live services, which is already covered. They see Bungie as a mechanism to get the games that Sony's making proper within their own first-party studios or whoever to make them successful, which is something Sony had trouble for years and years, right? Okay, but this is what's interesting for Bungie. What's in it for Bungie? And Totogi answered up. It says, number one, worker retention. I guess potentially Bungie was in a situation where they were having issues trying to retain workers. So Sony, with this 1.2 billion deal, now has the financial backing to properly compensate workers to stay there. And number two, recruitment. That was interesting. With the help of Sony, Sony will be able to help recruit top talent. Now, if you know Sony or if you've been listening, lots of developers praise Sony as a publisher. They have been very friendly to publishers, very helpful to publishers. And majority says that, hey, Sony is, when it comes to being a proper publisher to support the devs, they overall gets good praise from a lot of developers. So Bungie's relying on Sony to help recruitment, to hire even more talent to make their studios better, and they feel Sony can help with that. The third thing is expanding Bungie IPs beyond gaming, and that's pretty much using Sony's, you know, picture connections, television, and animation. So Bungie has plans to help formulate, you know, with Sony to create maybe Destiny TV shows or a Destiny movie, Destiny animated film, things like that. They want Destiny to go beyond just a video game. So that's pretty interesting right there. So that's another reason why they're collaborating, and they went with Sony, because Sony has those connections, which is pretty interesting. And that a topic is interesting itself, because I know a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, but there's discussion about Microsoft versus, you know, all these other companies, and Sony being a movie studio, a music studio, a film studio, and all this other stuff. There's advantages to things that other companies don't have. I think the only other company that's similar to them in that nature would be Amazon, because they have Amazon Prime. Amazon has their own, film studio and stuff like that. So they have their own, music. Well, they have their own music streaming service. I don't think they have their own music, like they don't have music artists and stuff like that. So Sony does have advantages in some areas that can help a studio or publisher that plans to expand their IPs beyond gaming and are looking to get into film. They're looking to get the IPs as cartoons, live action shows, and stuff like that. Sony provides a good connections for that. Okay, and that's pretty much it in terms of the earnings call. For in particular to the gaming section. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that I won't cover because this is more for gaming. But to get a quick note, I will say this. The big takeaway I got from that, besides the Bungie, which was pretty easy, is the talk of multi-platform. There was conversation that they're really happy at the performance of what's happening on PC. They really like what they see from Bungie on how they're able to handle their services across multiple platforms. And Sony plans to capitalize that. Again, because the conversation was Bungie and live services, they mentioned multi-platform. Like I said, it was hard to gauge whether they're just talking about live services or they're talking about everything in total. I'm going to say everything in total because there was a segment where they talked about the success of God of War on PC, and they really, they really are happy about that performance, and that with the PC reviews ended up being a 93 Metacritic. So that kind of tells me there's potential. You're going to see more games on other platforms. They didn't go into day and date, so there's no conversation about that. The difference between day and date games, or, is there going to be some, benefits? No one even asked a question on how this will impact, the console. That was not even talked about and stuff. So anybody who's saying they said stuff like that, it was not in the investors call. And that's pretty much it. So I hope this is helpful for those that are interested in this. I know many of you may find this boring and you can move on. Don't worry, I'll come up with more content that you can enjoy. But I thought many people were having issues to trust the sources of what's out there. And I just wanted to provide you factual information. So it's going to be interesting what's going on over the next couple of years. For now, hey, for those of you that's all about the games, Gran Turismo is coming out next month for you. I got Sifu Horizon Zero Dawn pre-ordered. Elden Rings, Ghostwire Tokyo just had a little, reveal today. So there's some been positive impressions about that. MLB The Show. So there's just a lot of stuff going on in terms of gaming. If you just want to keep it gaming and play gaming, there's a lot of games going on. So we'll talk more about that. But anyway, I hope you appreciate this. If you enjoyed the topic, and if you want to see more, just subscribe. Definitely hit the like button, and I hope you enjoyed this. All right, you guys take care. Have a good weekend that's coming up. All right, take care. This is your boy Porter Rock 77, and I'm out of here. Peace.